You've been a writer for over, coming about 3 decades or so of your life.
You got that right.
Yes. So, how has it been? Have you been able to live on poetry? Let me start straight away.
I'm afraid the answer is a categorical no. And that also goes, I guess, for about probably 95% of poets in Nigeria. No, I haven't been able to live on my poetry. It hasn't stopped me from writing. First of all, I write poetry to satisfy an inner lust in me. So yeah, we keep writing, but no, I haven't been able to live.
Like Omale, it's not something I've ever made any serious money enough for me to live on. A bit of money here and there, once in a while to buy a recharge card, but nothing, nothing significant. Poetry is not very, commercial in Nigeria.
Yeah.
Hello there. You're welcome to Akweya TV once again, and today we're talking literature. It's a very important aspect of our lives, and we are paying a lot of attention to it in Akweya TV. And today we're talking about the idea of writing, especially poetry. A lot of people know about poetry, but they think it's that very difficult part of literature because of how it was taught in schools. But what of those who produce literature? I have in the studio with me those who produce it, and what they are doing. Does poetry produce a source of livelihood? Is it worthy of living on? As a poet, can you live on it? And I have 2 poets in the house who are going to talk to us about their lives as poets and their lives outside of poetry, the things they do for a living. In the studio is, from my far right, is Sadiq Alabi. He's the author of A Texture of Air. The Texture of Air. Sadiq, you're welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everyone joining us at home.
Yeah. And Sadiq is also working as a communication officer. So it's one thing we'll talk about. And on my side is the vice chairman of the Northern Nigerian Writers Forum. Well, immediate past vice chairman of the Northern Nigeria Writers Forum, but he's the author of Behold Your Scented Daughters. That's Omale Allan AbdulJabbar. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you so much for having me, and hello, viewers at home.
Yes. So we're going to have this lovely conversation. Stay tuned, but if you're watching us on YouTube, quickly share this because it's going to be quite interesting what you're going to hear now. Be right back. Hi, Akweya TV has got so many shows for you. We've got a Hangout with Busayo, we've got our interview shows, we've got women empowerment shows, and you can watch us on NTA Makodi. Also, you can watch us on YouTube and different channels. I am Odo Diego Kenyodo, and I think you will love everything you see on Akweya TV. Keep a date with us. All right, so you're welcome back. And those of you who just shared the conversation, thank you very much. Keep sharing to your friends and well-wishers and anyone with a literary inclination who is a poet or any writer. I'm sure they'll benefit from this conversation. All right. So, gentlemen, let me start with Omale Allan AbdulJabbar. You've been a writer for over, coming about 3 decades or so of your life.
You got that right.
Yes. So, how has it been? Have you been able to live on poetry? Let me start straight away.
I'm afraid the answer is a categorical no. And that also goes, I guess, for about probably 95% of poets in Nigeria. No, I haven't been able to live on my poetry. it hasn't stopped me from writing. First of all, I write poetry to satisfy an inner lust in me, and also to temper the muse that tends to, keep, stringing voices at you, as most of us poets are faced with. Sometimes you have to get up in the middle of the night and write. So yeah, we keep writing, but no, I haven't been able to leave.
So I think you seem to be agreeing.
Yeah.
When you wake up in that middle of the night, how does it feel? Do you feel you're doing one great thing that is important to the world, or you just
I feel like I'm doing what I have to do. It's not like I have any option, any choice in the matter. When the muse calls, you pick up your pen or your phone or whatever you use to type, and you write. So you don't do it for the money because there is really not money in it. You don't do it for the fame because it's difficult to become popular with poetry. There are probably easier things to do to become popular than poetry. You can talk on social media, for example. But you do it because you feel the urge to write it, to take that inspiration and put it into words for people to read, and for people to maybe to send a message or to explore a theme. But like Omale, it's not something I've ever made any serious money enough for me to live on. A bit of money here and there, once in a while to buy a recharge card, but nothing nothing significant. Poetry is not very commercial in Nigeria.
Variable,
So are we doing the wrong thing? Because if African poetry seems to have started with an oral tradition, there was the oral tradition, and then we followed the Oyibo people to start transferring it onto paper. Are we backing the wrong horse? Should we go back to what D.K. Chukwumerije, Efe, Paul Azino, and all of that, the spoken word movement, Akim Lasisi, Reward, and all those guys? Should we go back? Are we saying poetry should go back in that direction?
I think there is room for both. We didn't have writing system in the past. So our not just poetry, even storytelling was basically oral. History was oral, like every other thing was, it has to be oral because we didn't have, especially in the South. In the North, there was a bit of writing in Arabic, in Ajami, but in the South, we didn't have that much of literary culture, so it was oral. But now we have this tool, so we can still continue to use the writing tool, continue to write. There are some things that are better on the page than performed. And there are some things, there are some emotions, some poetry that are better, performed. So, but maybe the two can go hand in hand. But also the poets too might explore how best to, because the thing is to get your idea to the people, what you've written to the people. So if it is not working by putting it in paper, we can start thinking of other ways to get it out there, not box ourselves into the written, the book and the anthology form. We can think of other means of distributing our poetry. So I think it's worth exploring how we can do more in getting our poetry to the people.
So that's placing more demand on the poet, isn't it? That the poet now should start knowing how to perform his poems. Is that something you support?
I would say yes and no. Yes, because if a poet gets some kind of commercial gratification from his art, it's not a sin at all. I'm sure you agree with that. Matter of fact, it's very encouraging. Yeah. I know that once I got 100,000 naira and I was building my first house. I used them all to buy some bags of cement. It was really very nice. I can't describe it. Like, this is my intellectual property fetched to me this money. I can't describe it. Nobody dashed that to me. So yes. No, on the other hand, because essentially it isn't about the money. Not about the money at all. And as Sadiq was saying earlier, I agree with him too, and I don't agree too, about the spoken, word artist. That's the gift that that artist is given as a performer. Yeah. So we don't all have to be performers. So if you have the gift of performance, that's brilliant. But also, just being able to enter, the message you've been given on a piece of paper somewhere. You're not there anymore, and somebody just picks it up at some time, quiet time, whatever time it is, and read it gently with the message just sipping in, like glucose. It's a wonderful feeling. And I think it's powerful in its own form compared to the other guy who is out there and performing it live. But again, you see, I said yes and no, so I keep going back and forth. There isn't anything wrong if we perform the poems, if we put them in audio versions and get them out across to the people. I was telling myself the other day that Nigeria is about 200 and something million people and all that. Where is the ability of you, just one poet, out of this number I've mentioned, to be able to engage everyone to the point of them saying, oh, Omale Allan AbdulJabbar is a Nigerian poet. 200 million over Nigerians. So yes, just do your own part and feel good in believing that if 1, 2, 3 persons out there is able to read what you've written, is entertained, is informed, is educated, you've done your bit. Okay.
So, what's the place of language? Because when you write poetry, it's elevated language. Sometimes it loses most of the people, What's the place of indigenous languages in this advocacy? Because most times you guys are trying to promote poetry, you're trying to get more people to be aware of poetry. What's the place of indigenous language poetry in contemporary Nigeria?
Interesting question.
I may not be able to speak for, other cultures, but in Yoruba poetry, it's still a bit doing well. The oral poetry, you have the Akewi, Ijala, these people go around to festivals, to events, weddings and all that, to perform their poetry, and they use Yoruba in the best way possible. That if you listen to them, you learn, even though you've been speaking Yoruba for decades, you learn new things, you learn proverbs, new way of using words. So I think is well and alive in that aspect. We used to have a strong written Yoruba poetry before. We used to have many poets, but like with other literary tradition, even with Yoruba novel tradition and plays, it has gone down a bit. People are no longer publishing as we had in the 60s with J.F. Odunjo and other writers writing in Yoruba. Some of them were even being translated into English by Wole Soyinka with Bujoda Inugbo, but we don't we no longer have a strong culture in people writing poetry in Yoruba language. Or maybe they are writing but not publishing as much. And even if they are publishing, do we even have literacy skills to read Yoruba in a way? We used to have old people who could read Yoruba fluently, but today people can barely speak it fluently, let alone read it with all the signs and those complications. So the advocacy has to be on that side too, because this is our heritage. you are given this heritage and we shouldn't allow you to die. So it has to be, find a way to encourage the learning of the language so that we have people literate in the language. Like you were saying, even with English poetry, the standard of education has fallen to a stage where every poetry, every poem is hard for them to understand because they don't have the education.
Teachers who teach it in a very difficult way.
So poetry is accessible. The metaphor is language, is this use of language is not that difficult. It's things you can say around you. But the standard of education has fallen to a stage where people can't access even the basic poetry. So I think we have a problem in that because the audience is not there. So even if you are a good poet writing in English or in Yoruba or in Hausa, are you certain that you have an audience that can understand what you are trying to say? Because at the end of the day, we all become writing, banner lines that, have no literary quality. And those might reign for a year or two, but they will not stand the test of time.
Do you agree? I mean, you are from the Idoma heritage, right?
Yeah.
Now, are you able to write in Idoma for, say, your children to understand?
A bit. Okay. Like Sadiq, poetry in Idoma language is alive and thriving. It may not be much in written form. Our cultures and traditions are there. If you listen to the chant of the Aleku masquerade, everything that is coming out of there, from this realm into the other realm and back, is all poetry. And I think it's high time we all try to document these traditions are also being eroded with time. As for the language of poetry, you see, poetry is poetry. It's not prose, it's not drama. That is its own form, and it's got its own peculiarities. If you started trying to write poems in a way that you wanted more or less to perhaps want to communicate and ensure everybody understands what you're doing, you may find out you're just writing prose. And that's why sometimes we come up with a term, your poetry is prosaic. For a poem, it's like a light, a lamp. You put, a shade over it, not the naked light. You put a shade over it, and that's where the beauty of it comes out. As Sadiq said, you couldn't write poetry without metaphors, and all the other figures, of speech and poetic devices you employ. So that is its own form. So it exists in that form. And it may interest you to know that I just read a book here, a poem here. Where is it now? Yeah, good. From here to now. I read a poem that is more or less nonsensical. Can I read it?
Yeah, you're good.
It's called Granny. This is an anthology of contemporary poetry of Delhi. Granny. My granny was insane, and her madness ripened into death. My uncle, a miser, kept her in her storeroom, wrapped in straw. My granny dried up, burst. Her seeds flew out of the window. The sun came and the rain. One seedling grew up into a tree whose lust bore me. Can I help writing poems about monkeys with teeth of gold? This is a wonderful piece of poetry. Fantastic, great poem.
What makes it great?
You see, that's what Sadiq was saying. It's a layer after a layer after a layer. It isn't talking about monkeys. It isn't talking about death of a grandmother. It's talking about transition, into one form and another.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of it. And what I was saying before I picked it up, look, reading this poem, I will just, at some times and other poems I encounter, enjoy it. I don't want to know the meaning. Okay? It's wonderful. I'm entertained. It's beautiful. It made me think. That's good. So you may choose to try to understand it. And then you come to understand it. What the poet is saying is definitely different from what every other person reading this poem will be saying. So it has different meanings to different people. But yes, it makes you think. It strikes your imagination. And it's wonderful, the very beautiful layers and layers of meanings that are encoded there. So that's poetry.
Okay, I'm going to come back. We're going to go on a short break. And when we come back, we're going to discuss when people accuse poets of being lazy, because it's so esoteric, it's so cryptic, We'll come back and see what are the structures that can be put out there to promote poetry and do the things that are being done for prose fiction. Why poets can become great once again. Stay tuned. Hi, Akweya TV has got so many shows for you. We've got a Hangout with Busayo, we've got our interview shows, we've got women empowerment shows, and you can watch us on NTA Makodi. Also, you can watch us on YouTube and different channels. I am Odo Diego Kenyodo, and I think you will love everything you see on Akweya TV. Keep a date with us. All right, welcome back. We've been having this interesting conversation about poetry, that art form of condensed emotions that are written in verses on the pages of paper, and many times when you hear them performing. So we are with two great poets who are in the house. Sadiq Alabi, the author of The Texture of Air, and then we have Omale Allan AbdulJabbar, author of Behold Your Scented Daughters. So you were describing to us the beautiful thing that poetry is. And it's so cryptic and it's so personal, it's so private. And people are not into that anymore. They're into pop culture that everybody can understand and all of that. So people say poets are lazy. They just want to write something cryptic and say it's beautiful. How do you react to that? Sadiq, let me ask you. You're just lazy, you just don't want to be able to think very deeply. You just want to write words that are cryptic.
But the beauty of our world is in the diversity of thoughts, of writing, of people,
expression,
of even the plants and animals. So we have to have this diversity. There's a place for pop culture, but there's a place for literary art. Because literary art has its own use in helping us to grow our language, helping us to imagine new things. Pop culture tends to focus on what is already existing that people can relate to. Literary art allows us to imagine new things, and that's why you have poetry written, 500 years ago, still being read today. Shakespeare and co. You have Whitman in the U.S. writing 200 years ago, still being read today, because they were not limited by what was existing then. They took language to the next level. So I think there's a place for poetry. I'm not saying that poets should be insular. I don't believe in what Christopher Okibo was saying, that he read his own poetry just to poet. He didn't read his poetry to non-poet. He went to a conference and said that to the audience. I don't believe in that. Because
I think Shoyinka said something like that. If you don't understand,
Shoyinka is more like what Okibo was a string.
Like, he doesn't even try to talk to non-poets. His poetry is for poets. That's very insular. How many poets are in Nigeria that you'll be writing just for that audience? But what he was trying to say is that his poetry, the language he uses, he believes only poets can, get into that shrine with him. But I don't think that's what poets, should aspire to. We should aspire to talk to the public. We should aspire to, as much as possible, make sure that people can get what we are trying to say. They don't have to get all the metaphors there. They don't have to get all the references, but at least they get enough of them. We can try to hold them with the musicality of our language, of the poetry, with the rhythm, not just the words. Sometimes you read some nice poems that you enjoy the rhythm, but you have no idea what the poet is saying.
Yeah,
but at least the poet held your attention. And maybe in 10 years, you might get what the person is trying to say. That, I mean, when I was younger, I read Wole Soyinka's Lion and the Jewel. And I had no idea what it was trying to say. But when I was in my final year in university, I picked the book again in the library and was like, this is the funniest play ever. Like, it's so funny. So sometimes it takes time. But the idea is to make sure that you are able to hold people
for a while.
If all of us are waking 10 years later to say, this is what this guy was trying to say.
I think he didn't mean that in that context. I'm sure you.
Some will be a week, some will be one day.
For me, all creatives go to the same pot, to get out something and then take it back to society. So you could write it, you could paint it, you could sculpt it, and then in writing it, you could go by poetry, prose, or drama. But we're all trying, to get a message out. And I think that just like, some Nobel laureate, said that every writer has a responsibility, to the society, and it's in as they say also that the writer is a custodian of the society. So in other words, his job is to keep the society together and prevent it from disintegration. Okay? So you speak to the establishment and try to be the conscience of the society. Everybody is going around doing arbitrary things. It is a writer, that tries to keep the society sane. So he has a message. And with that, I'm not a proponent of art for art's sake. Art must communicate, something. Yeah. So I believe that art must communicate, something. And you may choose your own medium in passing that information forward. And if you do not subscribe, or rather, if you're not called to be a poet, you're not given that gift of poetry. For instance, I write poetry, I write prose, I write drama. I used to write song lyrics. I'm trying to go. So I have everything. And some only have poetry. Achebe is more or less a prose writer. He has some poems, but he's not known for...
More or less an essayist.
Okay, an essayist.
That's
so you have your gift, you have your lane, and you do it best. So each art form is peculiar, to itself. I think that's what I can say.
All right. This conversation will not go very well if we don't listen to the poets themselves. Let them give us something. Let's know you are poets. Because you didn't show us your ID cards, we have Behold Your Scented Daughters here. It was published by Highborn. Blessed Memory, Hyacinth Obunse. He was also publisher of my collection too.
Lots of us.
And then The Texture of Air, Sadiq Alabi's The Texture of Air. So who's going to go first? I know you have your poems.
Some of them.
So let's roll with you first.
Okay. I think I would choose something. Good. A personal poem.
Okay.
It's called Tuareg.
Tuareg.
And it's for me. This is for me. It was written in Jos in 2007.
Wow.
At a time when I was trying to find myself.
Okay.
So the poem is a defining moment for me. My life is a house, hollowed by the wind, like a tent in the wilderness. My silk soul dangles in the breeze between the dialogue of sky and dust. Nomad at 66 seasons, forever afflicted with the lure of the open spaces. I am the bottled genie and the message, quietly awaiting discovery. Watching life's mysteries unravel slowly like an hourglass sand. Memories of my childhood ambush me like a web of sins. All the friends I used to know but can no longer see. What was new once and alluring, but soon grew old, tattered, and alas, gone. Bodies I've swam in, caves I've hidden in, and poetry, oh poetry, tiny winged persistent spirit, your medium in which we say it best. Damn you. I am the purpled breath of a tourist dream, floating between the dialogue of sky and dust, quietly awaiting discovery, searching for meaning. Thank you.
Lovely. Why were you so harsh on poetry at that
Yes,
point?
because I'm glad you asked. Even that spirit in the poem is part of my problem at this point in time. Like I said, here you are. As you know very well, there was a time my unemployment was national legend in this country among all my friends. So here, 36.
Yeah, 36.
So I'm here asking all these questions, and here is poetry asking me wake up, right? So I'm even tired of that damn poem.
Okay, that's great. Lovely. Okay.
Yeah, so this is homage to my hometown.
Okay.
I'm from Iwo in Osun State.
Okay.
The poetry is written in English, but it's performed usually with Yoruba and English, of course. So, here we go. Ọmọ Iwo Olodu Oba. Iwo Olodu Oba, ọmọ Atenigbola, ọmọ Atenigbore. I am the son of my fathers, scion of famed hunters and crazy warriors, who left the comfort of Esu streams, Syria mercenaries who gallop through famished forest, miles and miles of uncombed forest to pluck glories in the belly of enemy stuff. I am the son of my mother's 25 rands in the cerebrum of the ancient city, learning, growing. I gulped wisdom from weather-beaten breast, knowledge served with water from the depth of clay pots, of love with curious angle and context. Ọmọ Ìwó Olódù Ọba, ọmọ Atẹnigbọlá, ọmọ Atẹnigbọrẹ, Ìwó tí ò nílẹ̀kùn bẹ́ẹ̀ ni ò ní kọ́kọ́rọ́. I am the son of my ancestors and ancestresses, houses without doors, without padlocks, servant ordained commandos, who prowled for trespassers, for thieves, for straying warriors and their wars. We slept, snoring in exaggerated decibel. We did not care for the boring routine of keys, the inefficiency of creaking doors. No one could dare the patience of our commandos. Who would dare test the magnanimity of Odo Oba?
And I note that
wonderful.
rebellious use of the word ancestress. So ancestors are one now. Why are you poets doing this? Now you have created ancestress.
We want to emphasize the
Because I really come from a long line of very strong women, women who in the 19th century, 18th century were moving around this country trading. You know, at the time when women in England didn't even have rights to vote or to
have a bank account. My home, you know, my home mothers and grandmothers and great grandmothers, they were doing businesses on their own all over the place. So it's something I wanted to emphasize.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Wow.
Remember Al-Qasim, you know, introduced poetess, you know, when we talk.
Okay, so before we go, just one quick question about what should be done for poetry to promote it. You've got prizes for prose fiction. You've got publishing houses you've got awards dedicated to prose fiction. What should we do? What should be done to promote poetry? These are final thoughts I would want to hear from. Let me hear from you, Sadiq, first.
Yeah, I think our society first needs to, remind itself that it needs poetry. We are philanthropists, people with money, because this project of poetry will require resources. Publishing it, putting prices, having prices for it, having events, festivals, and all this. We have all these, different ways of supporting fiction, but we don't tend to do the same for poetry, and we need to start thinking of how to do it. Even government itself, we need poetry. We need to keep the culture alive, the language alive, the genre of literature. We need to keep it alive. So everybody needs to realize that, and the poets themselves, publishers of poets, lovers of poets, of poetry, needs to think of other ways to push out poetry. It doesn't have to be a book. It doesn't have to be in this form. It can be
Tenants of the House as a movie.
Yeah.
So can we ever have one poetry book as a movie?
We can. Instead of having an anthology, we can have a 30-minute production of poetry from different poets, and have it in that, and people can play it on their radio, in their car, have it on their phone and all that. So we need to think beyond because poets have boxed themselves into this book form, and those that are not doing book form, they are doing stage. But there are other other media that we can use to get poetry to the people. So we need to be ready, but other people also needs to support promoting poetry.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I agree fully with Sadiq. It's also an issue of how the poet also goes about interring, the message that is given. Like Sadiq just said, mostly it's in the book form, and then the spoken artist also comes in. One of the ways I think we can do very quickly to promote poetry, you see that the comedians are packaging, their jokes, and they have the audacity, to put it in volume 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, because and they're selling a lot. Comedians are living in Lekki, Banana, Snake, Crocodile Island, and all that. Okay, good. Because there is need, to ease up the tension that is, overwhelming the whole populace of the country because of the untold hardship, fallout of leadership, I would say, in the country. So the poet also is facing an urgent need to also package his art in that format. I believe wholeheartedly that we could take poetry as an entertainment also to the people, to also serve the same purpose that the comedians and the jokes are also serving. So that is also a very powerful, form we could do.
Okay, thank you so much. Sadiq Alabi, Omale Allan AbdulJabbar, thank you so much for this conversation. I look forward to having you some more in the studio. Let's discuss even bigger issues around the arts. Particularly, there are we've been battling for the National Endowment for the Arts since forever, and it's not become a reality. So, for those of you who are out there are different ways you can support the arts. You can buy books on a regular basis. Nigerian books published in Nigeria. So if you see Behold Your Scented Daughters, you can order 100 copies for your alma mater. Behold Your Scented Daughters. And then you have the Texture of Air, These are books. You can buy copies. Where is AJ Dagatola's collection? You know, there are different books available out there, and you can buy them, donate to your alma mater.
Yeah.
You know, you can donate to the libraries nearest to you. You can donate to your different areas, and you can be doing this in your various ways to promote poetry, to promote literature, to promote reading, and that's how society grows. Thank you so much for being with us, and please continue sharing this. If you have a poet or a writer or a singer who should feature on our show, put their names in the comment section, and any contacts, we can reach out to them. Or you can send a WhatsApp message to 09044 800 200. We will be with you. Thank you so much. Bye.